When you start talking about bone density, some pretty scary things can start to come up. Stories of women sweeping their deck or their patio and breaking their back without any idea that this was a problem in the first place. It just feels like you're out of control and you almost have no way of knowing, is this gonna happen to me someday? But I found that there's this free online tool that can actually predict how likely you are to break your hip or have a major osteoporotic fracture in the next 10 years. Best of all, like I said, it's absolutely free, and I'm gonna walk you through how to use this tool, where to find it, and what to do with the results. Real quick, if we haven't met, my name is Joe.Siddoway. I'm actually a doctor of physical therapy, and I help older adults live their best years on their own terms. So let's dive right in. Okay, so I'm gonna pull up here. I have the Frax calculator is what you put in on Google. Go ahead and just Google Frax calculator. It's going to say, you know, there's a bunch of different options. The one that I generally use is just right here, Frax Plus. I click on that tool, and this is gonna ask for some basic information. Now, the whole purpose of this calculator, like I said, is based off of what's going on. It can predict, and I'll show you, it should say down right here. It doesn't say on this particular calculator, but it's gonna predict two different things. One is how likely you're gonna have a major osteoporotic fracture, and the other one is just a hip fracture. And I think it's about 10 years out is how far they're able to dive into it. So real quick on here, we have continent, North America, country, you know, it's Canada, US, you can put whatever your race is. The reason they do this is because based off of, you know, whether you're Asian, Black, Caucasian, Hispanic, it can actually change what is the normal T-score that they have. Now, there's a lot of nerdy formula stuff you can dive into and actually calculate what your T-score should be based off of different factors like your race. My understanding is that this calculator does that for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put US Caucasian. You can put your name if you want to. And then we're gonna dive down into age. So I'm just gonna put some random numbers. This might not actually represent a realistic answer because again, I'm a 30-year-old male, and so I'm just gonna be making some things up. But you put in here, so like say I was 55 years old, my sex is I'm female, and let's put weight. This is in kilograms. So again, I don't really know kilograms super well. I'm just gonna put in, oh sweet, you can convert it. So let's say for pounds, let's say I'm 140 pounds, oops, 140 pounds. My height is in inches. I'm honestly not too sure what that would be. Okay, so let's say I am 67 inches. And then it's gonna ask these questions that is really important to know your history. So, you know, have you previously had a fracture? That's gonna super change how likely you are to have one in the future. So let's say, yes, I have. Did your parent have a fractured hip? We talk a lot about, you know, family history is something that's really important that helps you understand if you're more at risk. Like if you knew, you know, your grandmother or your parent, your mom especially, and if you're female and you know that they've had hip fractures, then it's kind of like, this should be on my radar. This should be something that I'm really focusing on. And so, you know, for here I'll say no, currently smoking, no, and then we get into glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids is a type of drug that you usually take for a variety of conditions. But one thing in particular is if you have some kind of autoimmune disorder, that can be something you use glucocorticoids for. And so basically, if you're taking any medications for a long amount of time, look up, is blank a glucocorticoid, and then you can answer that question. I'm gonna say yes, was taking glucocorticoids. And then rheumatoid arthritis. If you have this condition, that can impact your bone health. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. Now we get into secondary osteoporosis. And secondary osteoporosis, what they're asking is, do you have a condition like say type 1 diabetes or something that in and of itself, because of that disease, it commonly shows up as causing osteoporosis as well. So, you know, osteoporosis can come to someone who's in perfect health, you know, doesn't have diabetes, doesn't have any issues, and just it's a lifestyle thing. Weren't very active growing up, they're not lifting weights, that kind of stuff. It can also happen based off of if you have these kind of, I typically call them like long-standing chronic diseases you've been dealing with for a while. Some of those diseases, because of how they wreak havoc or how they work on your body, can cause osteoporosis and break down your bones. So again, this is where it gets highly specialized based off of your medical history. Is, you know, do I have anything that I've been dealing with for a while? And you can even just put it in Google. You can ask your doctor, hey, could this give me secondary osteoporosis, or could this lead to osteoporosis? And that should help solve a lot of problems there. I just had a thought. There's also a section down here that explains everything. So like, for example, if you're wondering about, you know, am I taking glucocorticoids? It actually gives you a little bit more detail. So like enter yes if you're using oral, or if you've been exposed to them for more than 3 months of a dose greater than 5 milligrams daily, or something like that. So that can give you a little more info. As far as secondary osteoporosis, like I already said, type 1 diabetes, that's something that can be there. And then osteogenesis imperfecta in adults. If you've also had hyperthyroidism, hypogonadism, or premature menopause, like these are different conditions that it says a couple other here, but like you can look at that tab. So you just scroll down a little bit and find that, and that should hopefully clear up any questions there. All right, so this is great. So we're already putting in our medical history, and then something else that it asks is, you know, alcohol 3 or more units a day. I don't drink, so I'm not going to put that in there. And then this last question, which is probably what most people get tripped up on, is femoral neck bone mineral density. That's what BMD stands for. Now, you have a tab here I just clicked that says no bone mineral density available. So if you've never had a DEXA scan, then you might not have that information on hand, and that's okay. There's all of these other, you know, you can have a T-score, and then it's going to give you this little blurb here that says the technology that's referencing is the DEXA femoral neck. It's based off of these values for women aged 20 to 29. The same absolute values are used in men. So it's kind of like, okay, gives me a little more info on that. So you could use your T-score. You could also, you know, hologic, I guess is how you say it. I've seen that as well. Most of the time, if you're coming into this and you already have a T-score, I say put that in. Or if they give you any of these other tabs, right, then you can put that in. A lot of you, though, who are watching this video, it's probably going to be like, I've never had a DEXA scan, I don't even know what's going on. And so just put no BMD available, and that should be fine. It's not going to give you as precise of an answer, but we're looking for generalities. We're trying to see, just based off of the things I do know, my lifestyle factors, am I at risk for having a fracture? So we filled out some of these. We're going to click calculate and then see what it says. Okay. So like I said, there's 2 different things. So it gives you the 10-year probability of a fracture. So they split this up into major osteoporotic. So I have a 19% chance that in the next 10 years, I'm going to have a fracture. And then for a hip fracture, it's 3.7%. So what that means is, you know, based off of actually the country you're in, they have different recommendations of, you know, at what percentage should you do something about it. I think in the United States, it's over 3%, at least for hip fracture. They say that, you know, you should talk to your physician about taking medications, because that's what we do in the US. We do a lot of medications. In my opinion, what this does is it helps, like, getting the percentage is important, but it's only really half of the importance of this tool. The reason why is because you can reverse engineer. If we go back here and we say, okay, well, what questions did it ask me? Well, it asked me if I'm drinking 3 or more units of alcohol per day. So, and if I want more details on that, you can go down there, right? It says, you know, alcohol varies in different countries, but it kind of measures it like, you know, a standard glass of beer, a single, you know, shot, something like that. medium-sized glass of wine. If I'm having 3 or more of those units per day of alcohol, then that's one thing I can cut out to be able to make my risk less. Okay, secondary osteoporosis. I'm not able to control what my genetics give me, but if there's a condition, like for example, it put on here, secondary osteoporosis, some of these things like hyperthyroidism, well, I can treat that, being aware that that's a problem that I've struggled with. Maybe part of my management to help preserve my bone health is to do whatever is necessary to treat the hyperthyroidism. Like that's one way you can go through this is not all of these things can you change, but most of them you can. You know, smoking, alcohol, we can quit those. Rheumatoid arthritis, again, you can look at what are some treatments to be able to help reduce the inflammation or to be able to help attack that disease. And the other thing too that is not particularly mentioned on here, but you know, I'm big into focusing on what lifestyle factors can we change, especially weight-bearing exercise, lifting weights. If I am lifting weights just based off of the science, right? Just based off of how bones remodel, how they regrow, I should be less at risk than someone else who has all the same factors but is not lifting weights. So there's things that you can do to kind of reverse engineer this and to be like, oh, you know, yeah, I was taking a bunch of glucocorticoids. Yeah, I was smoking a lot. Yeah, I do drink, you know, 3 more units of alcohol. And these are things that I need to take a look at and change. Okay, hopefully that was helpful going through that tool and seeing, you know, all the little nitty gritties, that tab at the bottom that I, you know, found and showed you at the very end there where it kind of explains each point. If you want to do more diving into like, I don't understand this question, what does this mean? You can use that tab. But hopefully that was helpful to see that no matter where you're at, right, there are things that are in your control to be able to reduce your risk of having a fracture. I really hope that you go through this. I'm gonna put a link in the description so that you can find it easier or just put Frax calculator. If you find that you have, you know, an issue with low bone density, maybe your risk is really high and you're worried about it, come and please join our masterclass. We have a masterclass that is 7 mistakes to avoid when you get diagnosed with low bone density. It's for anyone who has osteoporosis or osteopenia, or even if you're just getting into this world and you've had a family member who just, you know, had a hip fracture and you're worried, hey, maybe that's me. This masterclass goes through and walks through all the details of the things that you need to avoid to be able to ensure that you don't follow in those same footsteps, that you don't have this fracture that's going to constantly be in the back of your mind and ruin your 60s, 70s, and 80s. That masterclass is down below. I highly recommend you check that out. And in the meantime, please comment below. Let me know any questions you have, anything else you want to know about how to use the Frax calculator, and I love to see you in the next video.